Hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday on Resistance Live. It's ECM. We have a lot of anticipation today about tomorrow night's presidential debate, including a lot of questions on the Patreon feed that were like, I don't know how to describe it exactly, pure born panic. So we're going to talk about that this morning and what that's really all about. And we have a lot of other issues actually to discuss today, including things like voter intimidation and the related matters. Okay, I'm coming to you as always from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohegan land. Gratitude to the original custodians of the land on which I live and work. I am today wearing a off-white V-necked fuzzy sweater. It's nice and it's fall here in the Northeast. So nice to experience fall after so many years in California. And for our visually challenged viewers, my hair is pulled back. I have my gold hoops in. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I'm in my office in front of my plant, my oak cabinet, and a stack of books. And I'm really glad you're all here today. Okay, so pure panic about the debate this morning on the Patreon feed with a few minor exceptions. Reminder, if you want to ask me questions about anything having to do with politics, law, or the state of the nation, you can become a paid subscriber at patreon.com/resistance-live. And I will answer your questions on the air or in writing for 3 hours before every broadcast. So look, I want to just talk about this in context. All right. So about 3 months ago, we had another presidential debate. And going into that debate, it was predicted that Joe Biden was just going to wipe the floor with Donald Trump. And I, along with many other people, expected that to be the case. And that is very plainly not how things worked out. We know that President Biden was sick. We know that he was jet lagged. We know that he probably was so ill that he would not have otherwise gone on stage. We also know that his stutter and his capacity to manage his responses with that stutter was directly impacted by Trump essentially saying things to him off mic that threw him in real time. I understand why people would be having what is essentially a trauma response in anticipation of tomorrow night's debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I understand why you would be worried or scared that Trump is going to pull some kind of insanity. We talked about this, by the way, over the weekend for our Patreon subscribers during Progressive Coffee Hour. I also mentioned it on Friday's broadcast. But I do want to remind you all that this is a different moment, okay? And in addition to the fact that Kamala Harris has Secret Service protection and no one should be particularly worried at this point about Trump physically assaulting her, because if he were to do something that insane, not only would Secret Service immediately be there, but I will just tell you that the outcome of that would not be good for his reelection campaign, for Donald Trump's reelection campaign. And the flip side of this that I want to remind you all of as well is that Kamala Harris is a former prosecutor. Okay. And I'm going to repeat something that I said on Coffee Hour over the weekend because I feel like it's worth saying here. All right. When you are an attorney, they train you for moments of grave unpredictability in court. Okay. They train you for witnesses that kind of go completely off the rails. They train you in depositions to deal with people who are completely insane. All right. And you get this real world training, by the way, on the fly. Because a lot of people who end up in litigation are not terribly emotionally stable in some instances. Not every instance, but some. Okay. So we're not dealing with, in this instance, someone who is unprepared to handle crisis, derailing lies on their feet. In fact, I will tell you all that in my experience as a federal trial lawyer, one of the things that I had to do regularly was deal with witnesses who lied. And find ways in real time, whether in a deposition or when I was cross-examining them on the witness stand, to deal with their ongoing lying. All right. I will also just tell you that you learn how to self-regulate tremendously well in a court of law in incidents of crisis, whether that's in front of a judge or with a witness doing something they weren't supposed to do, or when you've got breaking evidence or evidence that you didn't think was going to be admitted. You learn how to deal with all of this without losing your cool. Okay, so anyone who is panicked about how this is going to go needs to do the work in response to that, what is fundamentally a trauma response, of looking at the actual evidence. All right, so one of the things that you can do to break down these sorts of processing structures, which are also known as confirmation bias or sometimes as limiting beliefs, is you can look at the evidence that you have that actually contradicts that. All right. Now, I said something similar to this last week, but I want to say it again here. Go watch the tape of Kamala Harris dealing with Brett Kavanaugh in real time. Go watch the tape of her inquiring of various Trump officials about the things that they've been putting out into the universe when she was just simply a senator, and you will have some sense of her capacity to deal with nonsense. All right? This is not someone who is not capable of handling an irrational person, let alone in a circumstance where they are trying to make their own case. All right? Very different set of circumstances. And no shade to Joe Biden, lifetime public servant. But I'm just going to say this, all right? Kamala Harris rose through the ranks to the position that she is now in and to be our nominee through a very rigorous set of positions that required her to be in courts of law. All right? And I don't have any doubt about her capacity to handle what's coming. I also think that if Trump does anything insane, which he will, because we all know that, her team and she herself are radically prepared for it. Better prepared, I would say, than Hillary Clinton was prepared for it in 2016. And Hillary Clinton was pretty well prepared. All right. But we know Donald Trump very well right now. Her team knows him very well. You want an indication of how this is likely to go? I would point you in the direction of the Kamala HQ digital response team, because they are gloves off right now. And I'm not worried at all. I'll just be really honest about this. Never say never, but I am not worried about whether or not Kamala Harris is adequately prepared for all the nonsense that Trump is likely to throw. I'm also just going to point out no audience, again, in the room. He's not going to have people to bounce off of, right? He's not going to have an opportunity to get that praise and, cheering and applause that feeds his ego so much. In fact, I would make the argument that a derailed Donald Trump in this event would, in some sense, be the best outcome we could hope for. Because if he truly loses his mind and makes no sense and can't string a sentence together and calls Elon Musk Leon like he did last week, or, can't finish a sentence because he can't find the words, that's better for us, right? That's better. And, I also want people to be prepared for something else, because, there's a lot of over the top ranting in social media this morning about fact checking. All right. We know Donald Trump is going to lie. We know that every sentence out of his mouth is going to be a lie. We know that fact checking Donald Trump in real time by debate moderators is extremely difficult when you're dealing with someone like this. Not that any of them ever have in the form of a presidential candidate. All right. But they're not going to be able to fact check him on everything. That doesn't mean that his lies are going to go unaddressed in the debate. And I will also pretty much guarantee you, without any inside information, that the Harris team is prepared for that too. I am certain that they have a strategy to deal with the things that he says in real time that are lies. And you can call out the lies without having to fact check them specifically at every single instance. If we did that, the debate would never end. All right. So one of the things that I think people need to get truly their heads wrapped around is that the debate moderators can do certain things. And I hope they will, right? The debate moderation in the prior debate was trash. Okay. By the way, I'll just point out that the debate moderation in the 2020 election cycle was also trash. So we shouldn't get our hopes up that the debate moderation this time around is somehow going to be magically stellar. Okay? We all know legacy media is failing us right now on so many fronts. But I would hope that there will, at the bare minimum, be a requirement to hold to the rules, and that if and when Donald Trump says something outrageous like, Democrats are murdering babies after they're born, or, you're sending your kids into elementary school and they're coming home with gender reassignment surgery performed by teachers, both of which are things he said in the last 72 hours. My hope would be that there would be some immediate fact checking on things of that nature. But please don't assume that there is not going to be a response to this from Kamala Harris in real time. Okay. One other thing I just want people to think about here. And, maybe you're not aware of this, all right? Through the lens of, coming out of being a trial lawyer, all right? When you're going into an oral argument or an evidentiary hearing that is very high stakes, And, I would say that kind of all of them are high stakes, except for, say, scheduling conferences. All right. But if you're going into an oral argument where like your case rises or falls on your ability to present the facts and the evidence on behalf of your client, you are practicing for every single adverse question or issue that could come up during that event. You are challenged repeatedly in the process of trying to answer questions that you expect to be posed to you about your case. You are practicing how you are going to respond if you get a sideways question or a question about the weakness of your facts or a question about the weaknesses of your legal position. You are prepared for that, right? This is something that is so ingrained in Kamala Harris's bones at this point that there's an argument to be made that at the bare minimum, debate prep will be a lot easier with her than it would have been with any other ordinary candidate. Okay. We are trained to think on our feet. Okay. This is one reason why, like, when you all are like, I don't understand how you can read the comments and continuously comment and not lose your train of thought. It's because of this. Okay. Like when people fly by in the comments, when trolls fly by in the comments, I have another tape running in the back of my head of everything that I intend to say. And that comes from 15 years of having been a federal court trial lawyer. So again, critically important to remember that Kamala Harris is a different candidate from Joe Biden. Again, no shade to Joe Biden, but, very different candidate, very different skill set, potential at the bare minimum to have all of that prior experience on display tomorrow night. And she's up against somebody who doesn't believe in debate prep, right? Like, I didn't see this personally, but somebody in the comments this morning said already, oh, Gates is helping him out. Well, that'll help. I mean, like, he's not practicing. He doesn't think he needs to practice. He wants to get up there and rant his nonsense and his insanity through the lens of his own dementia and narcissism. So, again, this is a moment where you deal with the reality of what's on deck. Now, for those of you who are like, I can't watch it, it's too traumatic, I'm not going to do that. That's fine, okay? Like, I'm not going to force you to watch it. I'm not going to even tell you to watch it. All right, well, maybe I'll tell you to watch it, but I'm not going to like insist upon it, okay? But I'm going to say one other thing, okay? My belief is that tomorrow night is more likely than not, by a lot, to be the final nail in the coffin of Donald Trump's final run for the presidency, because he is so far in decline and so easily triggered and so lacking in any impulse control at this moment that it's not going to take very much to send him off the deep end in real time. All right. You add to that the fact that he is facing down a Black woman who, at least in some polls right now, is leading. Please don't flip out about the polls. I'm going to talk about that too in a minute. Okay. But who stands the potential of wiping the floor with him, which we know triggers him as well, because he can't deal with women and he can't deal with people of color because he is a white supremacist. So there is hope that not only will all of his failings be unveiled on a national stage, but also that she may very easily and with strategy send him into complete nonsense rambling, right? All she has to do is publicly humiliate him once, and the debate will be over. So, you can choose to do what you want to do in terms of your own self-regulation and what your own, mental health can stand and your own fear can tolerate. But I personally think this is going to be like a moment not to be missed. Now, it could be wrong, happens from time to time, but I'm going to tell you that I think this is going to be a very different story than what we had in June. All right. We shall see. Okay. We shall see. All right. I want to talk about let's just talk about polls really quick, because I jumped onto that. One of the things that folks need to be aware of here is that there are routine daily polls happening right now. And, there was a poll out of Pennsylvania yesterday that a lot of people were panicking about. There's no question, this has been said, by the way, on the Kamala Harris volunteer calls, that Pennsylvania needs help. They need people door knocking for Harris walls. So if you live in a surrounding state, you're in New Jersey, you're in Delaware, you're in upstate New York, okay? You're in Ohio, okay? Not that Ohio doesn't need help, but you should go to Pennsylvania to door knock for the Harris Walls campaign if you are able to do so. All right. Because it's tight in Pennsylvania. That said, I have to put every single caveat on top of polling that I have put on here literally since last year. Okay. Polls poll a very specific small sample size. And if you do not go and look at the sample size and the polling methodology, you are missing a huge chunk of what the poll represents. Okay. Because if the poll was only conducted by landlines, you know that that is going to skew the demographic, probably toward older people who actually answer the phone at dinner time, as we've talked about here many, many times, okay? If you know that the poll is only of registered voters, you know that the poll doesn't represent the 4 million Gen Z voters who are voting for the first time in this election, nor any new women and ally voters who have signed up since the fall of Roe versus Wade, of which there are millions, okay? If you look at the polling and the polling says this was only conducted, by text message, that may tell you that the demographic that they're getting is a little bit broader. But then again, who answers those texts? I know I don't, because I get a few of them. So once again, I want people to get really clear on the fact that all that polls do is give you a snapshot of a certain demographic through a certain methodology for a very small window of time, okay? Polls do not vote. Polls are not actual voters that walk into a voting booth and pull a lever, okay? And in some instances, the polling sample size is so small, and I know the statisticians are going to argue with me about this, but I'm just going to say this. 1,500 polled voters is not the same as the demographics nationwide of who's voting in this election. And I truly want people to understand that your obligation at this moment in time is to literally ignore the polls. It's basically what I'm doing. I look at them and I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What else do I have to do today to get out the vote? Okay. It is not something that you should panic about. Because, by the way, we're like 57 days out now. We have an enormous amount of work to get done. And I'm going to tell you something else. The anecdotal stuff that I'm hearing from people who are actually out there door knocking is very positive, including in places like Florida, in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas, in places like North Carolina. Okay. I mean, I know people who are doing that canvassing and door knocking, in places where everybody would be like, it's a red state, it's all over, who are literally telling different stories about what they're getting when people answer their doors. So don't lose track. Don't lose track of the fact that our democracy rises and falls on those face-to-face communications with people about the importance of voting. All right. And so that brings me to one other thing, because there was a question today. I just want to note something, okay? I know there are a lot of people in this audience who have never canvassed a door. They have never door knocked using, the available software that will be given to you by the campaign that you volunteer for to talk to likely Democratic and independent voters, all right? And I know that it can be very intimidating. I know that it can be very scary, all right? It is still important that you do it if you are at all able. And I get nervous sometimes where I see comments that are like, I'm really scared about how this is going to go. I'm not sure I'm actually going to do it, because I will just tell you something else. You can ask to be paired with an experienced canvasser when you go out and do it. And also you will find once you have done it, that it's actually fun and you get to know people and you get to talk to people about real issues. And in many instances, you're going to be very pleasantly surprised by where people come down on Harris Walls or a candidate that you're canvassing for that you care about. Okay. That brings me to one point today before I move on to other issues, which is that you have 24 hours, a little bit more than 24 hours to get in on our new program, which is designed to train you to talk about political issues in this election cycle to anyone that you may come across, whether in a formal canvassing environment or in your grocery store or on your front lawn. It is called Say It Now, Political Messaging for Everyday Folks in 2024. And you can register for it. I'll stick a link up here when we're done with the live. You can register for it by going to GaiaLeadershipProject.com/say-it-now. Registration closes tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's an hour before the debate starts, 5 p.m. Pacific. So if you want to get in on that, you got to do it now. And class starts Wednesday, right away. And it's 4 weeks with great community and video training and live calls. And it's awesome. And you should do it. Okay. Let's just talk for a second, speaking of issues and how issues are being presented, about this really ripe piece of propaganda that is floating around right now in the context of the Harris Walls campaign. Okay, so those of you who were here with me during the DNC, remember that there were questions that were like, why doesn't Kamala Harris have an issues platform, right? Which was the beginning of all this propaganda. And at the time I said, hold up, the DNC has a platform. She is the Democratic Party nominee. That means she has adopted the platform because the party's platform is the candidate. Does everybody understand this? This morning and last night, there was this resurgence of things. Kamala Harris doesn't have any issues. Where does she stand on any issues? There's no issues anywhere. She doesn't have issues on her website. Okay. I have to remind everyone that we are dealing, again, with an extremely rare set of circumstances here in the context of Kamala Harris's candidacy, which is that like 6 weeks ago, I think is what it is now, maybe 7, she was not the nominee. Okay. She didn't have a built out website for a presidential candidate, right? She did have the platform of the party being built in advance of the DNC, but she didn't have like a whole robust list of issues where every single position that she had on every issue was drafted and posted somewhere. Not the end of the world, right? Doesn't mean she doesn't have any positions on anything. In fact, like we've been hearing from her nonstop on the campaign trail about what her positions on like pretty much every imaginable issue are. All right. So now, just so everybody's aware, as of like midnight or thereabouts, there is an issues page on Kamala Harris's website. And so if anybody comes up to you and is like, I have no idea what Kamala Harris says about any of these issues, where's her issues positions? You can send them to kamalaharris.com. And I think it's even like /issues, but it's posted on my Threads feed this morning if you would like to go look at it. All right. So like, again, please make sure that if you are hearing that position, you are directing people to the issues page on her website. Okay. Like that is propaganda. The idea that she doesn't have any positions on anything is propaganda. And by the way, I will remind everybody that Trump's only policy position on anything, to quote my friend Santiago Meyer, founder of Voters of Tomorrow, his only policy position on anything is ethnic cleansing. Round people up, stick them in concentration camps, deport them, and then we'll fix the housing crisis. Like, come on. Like the double standards are like freaking appalling. Okay. We had a question about voter intimidation. And you guys will remember that about 2 weeks ago, I spoke on the broadcast about the ongoing voter intimidation in Texas, where Texas officials went after voting rights advocates from LULAC, which is like the oldest Latino voting rights organization in the country. They showed up at their home, they kicked down their doors, they went in, they raided them, they took cell phones and laptops and all sorts of other stuff as a means of intimidating voting rights activists for the Latino community, all right? Something similar is happening in Florida now, except it's with folks who worked on the abortion rights ballot initiative. Reminder, abortion is on the ballot in Florida in November. What has happened now is that we are seeing local law enforcement being weaponized to go out and essentially threaten and intimidate people who worked on the abortion rights ballot initiative. The reminder that I have for all of you is about the stakes, okay? If you don't want local law enforcement being weaponized against you because of the political positions that you hold, you have to make sure that Democrats get elected, period. Because what they're doing with this is they're flagging for us, and this is not the first time with Ron DeSantis, that they are prepared to mobilize and weaponize local law enforcement, including sometimes volunteer forces and not even local police or sheriff's offices, to go out and scare people for taking political positions, to use the power of the state to intimidate people for taking certain political positions. This is antithetical to everything that America is supposed to stand for. Not going to claim that it's never happened before, but I do want to point out that these sorts of tactics are the last vestiges of white supremacists who know they're losing power. All right. So this is the point. Do not be scared by this. Do not refuse to be intimidated by it. Because we're at a real make or break point right now. We either push through November 5th, doing everything within our own personal capacity to make sure that Democrats get elected up and down the ballot. That includes state and local elections. Or this is how it's going to be everywhere. And I know none of us in this audience want that. All right. I'm going to remind you all, for the person who's like, what's being done about it? Go look at what the ACLU is doing about it. Because the American Civil Liberties Union is not taking any of it sitting down. Neither, by the way, is Mark Elias, who I saw this morning, I think has something in the range of 116 ongoing litigations related to voting rights. Okay. So again, don't direct your ire at the organizations that are fighting back for not doing enough. Direct your ire at the fact that the state authorities are being weaponized to terrify people into, like, what they want basically is for people to not mobilize to get out the vote. And I'm going to remind you all that one of the things about stochastic work in this regard is it's not just designed to scare the people they're actually raiding. It's designed to scare everybody else. What's going to happen to you if you're Latino and you show up to vote in Texas? We're going to check your papers, round you up, stick you in a concentration camp, and deport you, even if you're a lawful American citizen. That's the message that's being sent. right? So do the work of managing your own emotional responses to this stuff and continue getting out the vote. Like, that's the answer. That's the answer. All right. We had a question this morning about the what do I think about the potential influence of QAnon and RFK Jr. Okay, so we do have this issue happening in North Carolina where RFK Jr. has not yet been removed from the ballot, and then there was an appeals court that said he has to be removed from the ballot. And I just want to point out that people who are mobilizers in North Carolina have a lot more to say about this than what is being reported on the top line in the mainstream press. RFK Jr. had to go about setting up an entire new political party in North Carolina and wasted an enormous number of resources getting out his candidacy in that state. And there is every good reason to keep him on the ballot, which, by the way, will draw votes away from Donald Trump, than not. Okay. But we're going to see how that shakes out. I don't want anybody to panic about it. It's moving very quickly through the court system in North Carolina, and we'll see how it, like, what happens with it. Right now, we have to wait for, like, you know, a determination of who's going to be on the ballot, because ballot printing is currently being stalled. But that's, you know, my bet is we're talking 24 hours max. All right. So we'll have to see what happens next on that front. But I want people to be, like, very thoughtful about the fact that at the moment, the RFK candidacy does more damage to Donald Trump, even with his endorsement and his withdrawal, if he's on a ballot, than it does to Kamala Harris. And, you know, yes, I know that there is the rare yoga/wellness influencer who fell down an anti-vax rabbit hole and is lost to sanity, who is probably endorsing RFK Jr. over, like, Kamala Harris. I will just point out, cults are cults. And, you know, that's something that we're going to have to face down. Do I think it's widespread? No. And do I think the answer to it is to get out the vote and make sure that you are mobilizing disaffected and disenchanted voters? Yes. Don't get into a battle with your neighbor who thinks that, like, you know, fluoride in the water supply is poisoning people's brains, right? Don't get into a debate with your neighbor who thinks it's totally fine that RFK Jr. like barbecued a dog and dropped a dead bear cub in the middle of Central Park because he doesn't believe in vaccines. That is not someone who you are rationally going to be able to convince to do something else in this election. All right. Make sure instead that you are focusing on mobilizing the vote with people who are, like, not engaged. All right. Because that's really where we've got to do, like, the work. Okay. All right. I want to talk for a minute, because I know everybody needs good news in moments of high anxiety, about what happened in Penzies in Pittsburgh over the weekend. So if you missed it, and I don't know how you could have at this point because the footage is everywhere, but Kamala Harris did a campaign stop in Penzies Spices in Pittsburgh. You all know Pittsburgh is near and dear to my heart. I went to college in Pittsburgh. You know, I'm not going to try my best Yinzer accent, but I, you know, was there after college before I went to law school for a couple of years as well. And, you know, I love the Burgh, okay, in my own way. I still have friends there who live in Squirrel Hill who were campaigning for Malcolm Kenyatta, all right? I will tell you that the emotional responses in Penzies in that footage are incredibly telling, because, reminder, Western Pennsylvania is often referred to as Pennsyltucky. It is referred to as, you know, essentially a red area in large part. All right. And the footage that everybody keeps looking at kind of routinely is the footage where Kamala Harris walked into Penzies and there was a woman standing there with her cell phone sobbing. And Kamala Harris, because she has a person with empathy, unlike the guy on the other side of the ticket, saw this woman and was like, what's going on? Like, immediately knew that something was up. What's going on? And the response from this woman, paraphrasing, of course, but was essentially, I think you get it. And I think you know what's going on. And Kamala Harris's response to that was, it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're fighting back together. We are going to be okay. And that was a moment that I feel like a lot of us, particularly women and marginalized people, could feel in our bones, right? This thing of, please tell me I'm going to be safe. Please tell me it's going to be okay. Please tell me that the country isn't going to, you know, devolve further. Please tell me that the people I love are going to be safe, that my rights are going to be protected, that the rights of everyone I care about are going to be protected. Tell me that you're going to win. Tell me that you get it. And that is what Kamala Harris did in real time. It was an incredibly reassuring and comforting moment, and also a moment of real recognition, right? There's so much pain out there right now. And don't neglect the fact that when you are having your own response to like, something's going to go wrong at the debate, Trump's going to assault her at the debate, she's going to fail at the debate, that is the flip side of all that pain, right? That pain of how did we get here? That pain of why is he still in this position of being the nominee for his party, which is now only a MAGA party, as you've heard me say many, many times. Why, how is this being allowed to happen, right? And the thing I have to remind you all of is that, like, not only do we all have to hold each other up, right? Not only do we all have to be in community with one another when those moments take place, but we also have to make sure that we understand that the outcome of this is not outside of our control, right? Even when we're terrified and even when we're in an enormous amount of pain, the answer to the outcome is to take back that power and do the work, right? Because if you can continue mobilizing to get out the vote and showing up for Kamala Harris the way she showed up for that woman, and she's showing up for all of us, and she showed up for the little kid who was next, who talked about their teacher and whose parent was there, who was also a teacher, right? If she can show up that way for average, everyday Americans, our obligation is to show up for her, right? Because if you want the nation to be healed, if you want yourself to be healed, if you want us to come back from like the last 10 years and the last 500, because let's be honest, it's all part of a trajectory, we have to be willing to show up and refuse to cede any more power, right? And that means that when you're scared to door knock, you go out and do it anyway. When you're angry about where we are, you volunteer for a phone banking shift. That when you're in deep pain because you've lost a family member to Trumpism, you keep fighting for yourself and for everybody who, because like, you know, by the way, even that person who's fallen down the Trump rabbit hole deserves health insurance or health care, not even health insurance, right? You show up even in the face of those emotions and you continue to do the work for the better future. You know, like we have a lot to learn from like the giants whose shoulders we stand on who came before us. You know, I had a moment over the weekend where my kids and I decided to start watching Selma together. We're on this kick right now where we're watching like older films. And, you know, there are those opening scenes in Selma and in the trailer, by the way, about, you know, the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the bomb that killed 4 Black schoolgirls in a church. Okay. We have so much to learn from those who came before us who are doing this work and those who are doing the work in the present alongside us and with us and leading the way. Okay. Because I'm going to tell you one thing, right? If John Lewis and everybody else who was with him could march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge knowing that they were going to be beaten to a pulp, right? By cops that had like barbed wire wrapped billy clubs and do it because they knew it was the right thing, we can show up to canvass for Kamala Harris in this election. Okay, the demands of most of us are far slimmer than the demands that have been made of those who have been warriors for justice coming before us. All right. So, you know, please make sure that when you are thinking about how you're feeling and you're thinking about your own emotional reactions to what's happening in real time, that you are putting them in context, right? And you're also understanding that, you know, no one ever cedes power willingly. We have to fight for it. And, you know, we have a great and bright future ahead of us as a nation if we can simply do the work between now and November 5th, right? And that means, by the way, not neglecting your state and local elections. I voted yesterday for the first time in New Jersey. Some of you saw this on my Threads post, because currently I have no representative in the House of Representatives. And we have LaMonica McIver, who is an incredible rising star in the Democratic Party here, former public school administrator, currently on the Newark City Council, incredible record, just like very, very impressed with her, endorsed by Cory Booker, endorsed by Kamala Harris. I don't know if that's official, but there's a lot of photographs of them standing out there together. And, you know, this is a special election where like literally the ballot is like one box. I think it's the kind of thing that most people would neglect. But I really care about making sure that my local electeds are people who are representing my issues. And she's our nominee in November. But if she wins the special, which is, it's early voting right now. She's going to represent me in the House of Representatives going forward until November and hopefully beyond. So please don't neglect your local elections as well, because every single one of these elections matter. All right. That's my pep talk for today, my friends. Take some deep breaths, understand the lens through which we are working right now, understand the historical import of this trajectory that we're on, right? And don't let your fear overwhelm you. Like, do everything that you can to kind of like contain it, work it, transmute it into something positive as we head toward November 5th. All right. I will catch you all here tomorrow at regular time, if not before. Please don't forget to thumbs up this broadcast. Please don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube. And don't forget that if you want to support this broadcast because it helps you, you can do that by becoming a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistancelive for as little as $5 a month. It makes a huge difference, both to me and to my back-end team who handle all the tech on all of this. And final reminder, tomorrow is the last day to register for Say It Now, our new program on political messaging strategy for everyday folks. I'll drop another link up here when we're done. And, we give away an enormous pile of scholarships, but I think the last time that I looked, we had like 125 people registered, about almost half of whom were scholarship recipients. So scholarship applications are now closed, but I really do truly hope you will join us if you are not yet registered for that. All right. Lots of love to all of you. Hang in there, and I will catch you all here tomorrow, if not before, if there's a need for an emergency broadcast. All right. See you soon. Bye.